Hello, Eorsians.
I love that intro.
Welcome back to the Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV, Episode 2. In the previous episode, we talked about the planning and the initial design of Final Fantasy XIV. In this episode, we'll take a look at the actual product, leading into the alpha, beta, and the launch. The dev team was obsessed with the look and feel of the game, completely ignoring optimization in the process. They added these flower pots right here, or I guess it's technically a barrel. And one of these flower barrels had approximately 1,000 polygons and 150 lines of shader code.
What?
And that is the same amount of polygons and shaders as a character model.
Why?
Chuck 8 of these in a dungeon and you've got a full party with a fair amount of lag on the side. But one of the game's greatest assets was its music. Once again composed by famed Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. It was the first time in a long time Uematsu was hired to do a game's entire soundtrack, and the first track he composed was the theme for Limsa Lominsa. Uematsu composed around 70 to 80 tracks for the game, all of which was composed following clear guidelines provided by the dev team. The theme song, Answers, was also composed by Uematsu, and he picked Susan Calloway as the singer after watching her perform during a Distant Worlds concert in America 2 years prior to the game's release. The song would later become hauntingly foreshadowing for the events that would end the 1.x era a couple of years later.
Walk free, walk free, walk free, believe.
The game's 5 playable races, Hyur, Lalafell, Ellison, Miqo'te, and Rogadin, were directly based on the 5 initial races from Final Fantasy XI, Hume, Tarutaru, Elvan, Mithra, and Galka, with a few design adjustments to reflect the new setting. In addition to the main races, the developers also created 2 different clans opposed to the single clan setup in Final Fantasy XI. However, just like in 11, some of the races were gender-locked, specifically the Miqo'te being female only and Rogadin being male only, which is odd, seeing as they wanted realism yet failed to introduce both genders to all races.
Yeah.
Shortly before the game was announced, there were still some on the development team that were worried. Tanaka and Komoto had a rather absurd vision for the game. They wanted it to resemble 11, but bigger and better, more realistic. They wanted more of what worked in 2002 than what was currently standard during development. They wanted less UI work, less information in-game, and a convoluted battle system. It would seem that Tanaka and Komoto, although being great producers and directors for Final Fantasy XI, were both ill-equipped and unprepared for the current MMO market. Nonetheless, 4 years of planning and development is about to come to an end. June 2nd, 2009. A surprising announcement at the Sony E3 conference sealed the fate of the game.
What the hell?
The game was to be launched in 2010 for PC first, then for PS3 later. This sent shockwaves throughout the gaming world. At the time, the safest bet would be a Final Fantasy XI 2, but here it is. Final Fantasy XIV. Alpha tests were slated for March 2010, and only Final Fantasy XI veterans could participate. And so the alpha opened in March of 2010, and it didn't take long until people started realizing that something was terribly wrong. The graphical bugs aside, the battle system was a mess. Look at this icon here. This is a skill timer. You had to wait for it to charge to use a skill.
No.
Looks like a clever way to display a global cooldown, right? Wrong. You didn't even have auto attack. The most basic attack still had a skill timer. In addition to this, the massive bar at the bottom there was the TP bar. This bar had to fill up to use certain skills, and it would only charge if you were attacking a target and landing a hit.
What?
And get a load of this.
Wait.
The dev team decided
I need to hear that again so I can understand.
Wrong. You didn't even have auto attack.
No.
The most basic attack still had a skill timer. In addition to this, the massive bar at the bottom there was the TP bar. This bar had to fill up to use certain skills, and it would only charge if you were attacking a target and landing a hit.
What? So that feels a lot more like almost turn-based-esque, but something that you would feel like you need to do if you're planning to launch it on multi-platform, so PC and PS3. Because I guess, like, the idea for a control scheme that would be like how it is today, for example, with 14, just isn't something that no one had the brainchild, the genius at the time to be like, oh, well, we could do it like this. Like, they were just like, no, it's not possible. You're just going to have everything on this weird little timer with several bars that make no sense. I mean, it's strange that this looks very simplistic, but seems so confusing that I can't figure out.
And get a load of this.
Like, that's weird.
The dev team decided to not implement forums during the testing phase. This was supposedly done because of earlier recurring issues with mistranslations related to news updates.
So how do you get feedback?
So, they decided that instead of fixing the way news were translated to just, scrap the whole idea. So players were literally reporting bugs on unofficial Final Fantasy XIV forums and boards, so the devs could see it. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And this is where it starts getting both strange and interesting.
Oh no.
Before the game's release, producer Hiromichi Tanaka made several interviews to promote the game, and he's not exactly the most energetic and optimistic producer I've seen. Seriously, I've watched countless interviews with him, and not only does the interviews look amateurish and boring, but the way Tanaka is acting and responding to questions makes it seem like he either don't care or is completely oblivious to what the game he's producing is actually about.
Oh.
Look at this bit right here. This is an E3 2010 interview, right before the beta.
Rest in peace, E3.
Is asking Tanaka why Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have a jump feature. A rather basic feature in most games at the time. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 didn't have a jump feature. Pressing the spacebar activated the chat.
No.
So the interviewer asked Tanaka why this feature has been omitted.
That reminds me of, like, okay, so they made this mistake then, but, like, don't forget that New World launched without you being able to fucking swim. It was in the last 4 years, New World release, right? Was it like 2021? A modern day game, MMORPG. You can't go in water.
14, and the
you can now,
doesn't
but you
even
couldn't
understand
then.
the question. So the interviewer elaborates, and
The main reason is because we don't think it's important to have the functions in the game. They don't need to have the functions in the game. So that's the main reason. So even if you jump around and nothing is going to happen, so that's the main reason.
All right.
If you jump around, nothing's going to happen.
He laughs at the question. We don't need jumping. Oh.
Okay.
Tanaka made several claims during the interview, like the fact that he didn't want a minimap on the screen at all to make exploring more fun. Yeah, because what could be more fun than running around in a copy-pasted zone with no way of knowing where to go or where you are? Seriously. But maybe the reason Tanaka acted the way he did was because he felt the way most of the staff at Square Enix felt at the time. Final Fantasy is a cash cow, and the fans will line up for the milking. This was sadly somewhat true, but Square Enix was in for a rude awakening. The beta test period was getting close, but Square Enix kept pushing the date back from its original August 2010 target date, due to all the massive issues that were reported during the alpha test. The biggest headache for the devs was the flawed battle system. They had to change it somehow, and finding the right way to change it without having to rewrite the entire system proved difficult. The beta test was pushed them. They had to change it somehow, and finding the right way to change it without having to rewrite the entire system proved difficult.
Like many of you, I'm sure I was ready to get home from my job today, plop down in front of my computer and try out the open beta version of Final Fantasy XIV. Unfortunately, we all need to make some other plans for tonight. For me, that's Valkyria Chronicles 2. Square Enix has announced that due to some critical bugs, the open beta of FF14 has been postponed. Square Enix's second attempt at an MMORPG under their flagship franchise has gotten off to an inauspicious start. And considering the fact the game is due to come out September 22nd, fuck! Hopefully these major flaws are quickly fixable. No. What the hell? This is posted on the 1st of September and the game releases in 21 days.
Difficult. The beta test was pushed back until September 2nd, 2010, 29 days before official launch.
What?
During the beta test, non-Final Fantasy XI players got to join in, and they quickly discovered that this was far from what they expected. Countless issues were reported, such as slow and difficult UI, graphical errors, and low frame rate. The battle system, which had been revamped, had replaced the skill timer with a stamina system, working as a light version of the skill timer. Instead of having to wait for the timer to fill, you only had to wait until the stamina had reached a certain level, and then use the skill you wanted. Some skills used more than others, so it was pretty easy to deplete the bar and then having to wait for it to refill. The TP system remained largely unchanged, with the exception of the TP bar itself being placed underneath the hotbar together with the HP and MP bar. This is most likely the UI most 1.0 players remember to this day. They also introduced skill timers to skills and abilities, making it more strategic and akin to most modern MMOs at the time.
Okay.
However, most of these skills could often not be used unless you had built up the sufficient amount of TP or MP. Do note though that there was no actual global cooldown, with the exception of the regeneration of the stamina bar. Players voiced their concerns to the devs, but the game was getting so close to release, they had no time to make any major adjustments.
I can't get my head around
released,
it.
But these were minor and did not impact the battle system or the UI. It was later stated from sources inside Square Enix that more time should have been made to fix all the bugs that were reported during the beta period, but Square Enix did not listen to the devs' plea, and the game was shoved into release for PC on September 30th, 2010. The game's release was successful in Japan, ranking number 2 in the PC games charts in Japan, only beaten by Civilization V and ahead of StarCraft II Wings of Liberty.
Wow!
In the UK, it debuted number 10, behind games like F1 2010, Halo Reach, Civilization V, and Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. By November 2010,
oh my god, this is now I can put memory to it because I queued up and bought Reach. What? No way. Okay, let's go from here.
The game's release was successful in Japan, ranking number 2 in the PC games charts in Japan, only beaten by Civilization V and ahead of StarCraft II.
I'm surprised it beat StarCraft 2.
In the UK, it debuted number 10, behind games like F1
as an
2010,
MMO.
Halo Reach, Civilization V, and Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. By November 2010, the game had sold 603,000 copies worldwide. But Square Enix had just made one of their biggest mistakes to date.
This is a live-action trailer for the game,
not ready for
like
release,
advert,
and it was starting to show. With no official forums to ask for help,
That
confused
looks great.
players straight up abandoned the game after getting past the opening cinematic. If they stuck around long enough to actually get through the main story, they would soon find that the main story was shallow and difficult to follow, as quest NPCs did not show up on the world map, and the maps had no icon descriptions of any kind.
Oh no!
And it gets even better. The map could not be resized. It had to cover the entire screen, and the only way to move the map... Actually, if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 before, just think to yourself, what would be the easiest way to move around a full-screen map? If you thought click and drag, well, you're wrong.
Do you use arrow keys?
It's the logical buttons I, J, K, and L.
What?
But wait, there's more. Let's take a look at our gear. How do we get to our gear screen? Must be a hotkey, right? Nope. Pressing minus on your numpad, hello Final Fantasy XI players, or simply clicking on the main menu button would slowly open the menu. From there, click Gear, and behold the beauty of the gear screen.
Oh no! It's spinning! Oh man, that is so painful. You know what's crazy is like, it's still just so reminiscent of earlier game design. And I don't know, I think it's much better nowadays, for sure. But some of the Japanese developed games, even the greatest ones of all time, have had very convoluted control schemes, very unintuitive default layouts, and sometimes not even the ability to rebind yourself. If anyone remembers the first time that they actually put Dark Souls, the disc, into your console, I know, bear with me, it was a chaotic time. The first time you did that and you tried to play Dark Souls, all of those buttons felt fucking wrong. They felt so convoluted. It was like, why would I even press this? It's so weird. Previous time to that I remember being like, what the heck? Why would you do that? First time you'd ever played The Elder Scrolls Oblivion on Xbox. Try and have a guess what the jump button was.
Everything had to be accessed
Very
via
weird.
the main menu. Want to check your inventory? Menu screen. Want to check your link shelves? Menu screen. And now comes the truly reached part. A lot of you have already mentioned this in the comments section of my previous video. The fatigue system. I can barely explain this without sounding like I'm making it up. But here goes. The whole system was designed to prevent hardcore players from leveling faster than casual players. That's how you know it's a good system.
Oh no.
The system consisted of 8 thresholds, each threshold consisting of 1 hour of combat EXP. As you gained experience, you would slowly fill these thresholds, getting 100% experience until you reached the 8th threshold. After which, you would start to get less and less experience until you finally reached the hard limit and no longer earn EXP.
What?
If you stop doing combat or stop playing altogether, the
It would go
threshold
down.
would slowly start decreasing, and you could start getting EXP again.
It's a fucking mobile game. It was a free-to-play mobile game.
And the thresholds were reset every week. In addition to this EXP system, for your physical level,
That makes me
1.0
die
had a
inside.
skill point system for your class level. The physical level gave you all the basic stats like HP, MP, battle stats, while the class system gave you skills and abilities for the classes you were leveling.
Oh no.
And each class had its class level.
Yeah.
These had their own separate thresholds, of course, so if your EXP threshold was reached, you could always start leveling your class level. When you reached your skill point threshold, you could switch to a different class and earn skill points there. And while you're doing that, the threshold for the other class starts decreasing. This is how you could learn cross-class skills in 1.0 by basically leveling the class level, but not the physical level. Confused yet?
Yeah.
They defended this by saying it made it fairer for casual players, as they
No. Forget defending it. Let me pull it back a few frames. Forget defending it like making it for casual players. Forget that. Do some internal testing, okay? Did anyone test it internally and go, yes, this is peak gaming. I'm having such gaming right now. Many gaming.
They defended this by saying
Why?
it made it fairer for casual players, as they couldn't compete with the hardcore players. So, while casual players get to catch up to hardcore players in their vertical progression, aka their physical level, the hardcore players who had already hit their threshold could progress horizontally with their class levels. However, the real reason behind the system became abhorrently clear. Final Fantasy XIV had no actual endgame content at launch.
Oh,
The only
no.
system fully implemented to serve as side content was, you guessed it, the thing we saved from the first episode, leaves. Leave quests were supposed to be this game's key feature, the thing that
Okay.
separated it from the others. Quests you could pick up and do on the go, with shiny icons with beautiful stained glass paintings in them. These would keep you occupied for hours, right? Well, then you realized there was a time limit on these as well. Great. Just like in the current Final Fantasy XIV, you could only undertake leaves if you had a leave allowance, and in 1.0 you earned 4 allowances every 12 hours, and could stack up to a total of 99.
It's a fucking mobile
So,
game.
if you ran out of leaves, and still had several levels to go before another main story quest, which was bound to happen, because
It's
the
a
main
mobile
story
game.
was spread out real thin, you were shit out of luck, and had to grind mobs in the wild. Again, this was to cater for casual players that would pop into the game after a long time away, complete some leave quests, and then come back a week later to do some more. Unsurprisingly, every leave plate had been designed with great care and detail, and each leave quest type had its own corresponding look. There were in total 8 types of Battlecraft leave quests at launch: Diligence, Valor, Tenacity, Veracity, Wisdom, Justice, Temperance, and Devotion.
Okay.
2 types of local leave quests for crafters, Constancy and Ingenuity, 2 types of fieldcraft leaves, Munificence and Piety, and 2 types of Grand Company leave quests, which you could only do solo, Equity and Promptitude. I will read to you the description of one of them so you can get a general idea of how the descriptions of these plates are. Let's take this one, everyone's favorite leave quest, Tenacity. The Guild Leave plate portrays an Ellison archer riding a chocobo in a forest. These leaves always feature a monster that runs away, sometimes very far from his original place, and must be followed by the players to a certain spot, where more monsters will spawn and attack. Note that even if the fleeing target is killed before he reaches the reinforcements, those monsters will still have to be killed as well. Safe to say, 1.0 players learn to recognize the leave plates and select their leaves that way, to avoid unwanted quests. However, should you fail a local leave quest, you could not abandon it. You had to get it replaced, and then clear it. There was no option to discard a local leave.
Oh, shit.
This was the only viable system currently in place at launch for players to enjoy, other than the main story and certain side quests.
Oh,
Or
that
was
UI, it's beautiful.
There was a second system in place. Behests! These were basically just like leaves, except they would spawn randomly every 30 minutes, close to Aetheryte camps. And they would not require a leave allowance. Yay! There isn't really much more to say about them, though.
Well, so you
They
just
were
farm
basically
these?
just large leaves with a level requirement and on a 30-minute cooldown.
Okay.
Oh, and they were open for everyone, so you'd often have large groups fighting for the same goal. So I guess it could be categorized as a forerunner to the Fate system implemented in 2.0, but that's stretching it a bit.
Yeah, a bit.
So basically, running out of leaves meant you had to either grind for a very long time, wait for behests to spawn every 30 minutes, or stop playing. Seriously, this game felt like it was actively trying to make you stop playing it. But oh, there is so much more. But that's all we had time for in this episode. In the next episode, we will take a look at the teleport system, chocobos, market wards, and of course the critical reception and the decline of the game. I hope I've improved from the first episode, and as usual that you haven't died from boredom. If you're still breathing, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this and want the next part ASAP.
Yeah.
Leave a comment
Thumbs
telling
up,
me what
people.
you think of this video and your best and worst 1.0 memory for
Worst memory. As we transitioned from beta to launch and nothing was fixed that we asked for. Half the text was still untranslated. Best memory. I much preferred 1.0's regional openings to the 2.0, which are all cut and paste and slow. The originals were full of adventure, mystery, and who can forget the moment when Leviathan dove over the ship. I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's really interesting that you can see a few things in here that are remnants of like either ideas that have continued in FF14 or have been yoinked and like polished and used in World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 or whatever. I know that this is supposed to be looking back fondly on something that wasn't that great. But there are a few things in here where it's like, okay, yeah, that is crazy. Why do they think that was a good idea? But then there is elements within that where it's like, you just take a few of those bits and then you go and play Guild Wars 2. There's bits of that have been further refined. So it's all part of the wonderful world of being a fan of MMORPGs and how everything goes around, comes around and gets yoinked and twisted and improved and whatnot and borrowed. And it's so interesting how much stuff comes and goes, even like in terms of game design fashion, like in terms of what's popular to do and what's not. What's crazy is, you know, like to me, the levy, this whole section here, right, is pretty crazy, okay? Like a lot of the description of some of this stuff here, I think someone mentioned it in chat. World of Warcraft nearly originally used this as their XP system. They were going to opt for if you die, you lose XP. Then they were going to do something similar to this, and then they switched to actually not penalizing you at all and incentivizing you with arrested XP for not being logged in so that you would be able to catch up on other players. A catch-up system is in place now, and I actually mentioned it earlier in the stream about how the War Within currently makes it so that if I played for every week for the last 2 weeks that the game has been out and you logged in on day 1 of week 3 as a new player, there are systems in place that enable you to catch up to me so that even though I've hardcore full sent played every day, you would be able to attain close to, if not the same stuff that I did, so that really it's very flexible in terms of a casual approach in the sense that if you've only got a few hours to play, you'll be okay. But it does end up making those who want to go full send, at some point, you've got to wake up and realize that you could be doing something else with your time. Realistically, there's no benefit other than you're enjoying the game, you're playing the game, you're playing with friends, you're competing, whatever. Sure. But like in terms of in-game progress, it's kind of actually a fake treadmill. Like it really is. It's just interesting that's kind of what this is right here. It's fucking crazy. But damn, I'm really enjoying the series. That's 2 episodes down, and I'm like, wow, I can see how people would obviously love these, especially like at the time of them being posted, and still go back and watch them now. Very interesting retrospective look and peek behind the curtains to what will eventually become Final Fantasy XIV 2.0 and the greatest game of all time that we are all clearly fond of.